Live from the rooftop of the Hermann London Real Estate Group in beautiful downtown Maplewood, it's the St. Louis Realtor Podcast with your host, Adam Kruse.
Welcome everybody to the Hermann London Real Estate Group Podcast, live from the rooftop of Hermann London Real Estate Group in beautiful downtown Maplewood, Missouri. I'm excited today about our special guest. I'm excited about our topic. I'm excited to have one of our realtors, Kori Hetzel, in here today to help me interview, and we are just excited about real estate today in general. And I want to just jump right into this, and I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Kayser with Kayser Law. We have an attorney in the office today, so everyone be on your best behavior. But Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I know we've known each other for a few years. You've been to our office a couple times, but go ahead and introduce yourself to us if you don't mind, and
Absolutely.
to the listeners.
Okay, great, Adam. I sure will. My name's Elizabeth Kayser, and I am a real estate attorney. I founded the Kayser Law Firm back in 2008, and I've had the honor of going to Adam's office a couple times, giving short sale presentations. It's always been an enjoyable event. What we do, Adam, is we specialize in, for your audience, we specialize in short sale negotiations. And what that is that we negotiate with banks and their investors. When I say investors, I'm not talking about buyers. I'm talking about who owns actually the loan itself. In other words, if it's Fannie Mae, is it Freddie Mac, is it FHA, is it VA, or one of the GSE investors that actually has the note. And we negotiate for them to accept less than the amount due so that we can get the seller out of that bad situation and get them back into life as they know it, protect their credit in those upside down or negative equity properties.
Wow. Okay. You just said a lot there.
I did.
And if you don't mind, for our listeners, we're going to kind of start small or whatever. I think Kori has some questions for you. Just in general, we want to kind of start from the beginning, if you don't mind. Kori, go ahead.
Elizabeth,
Sure.
if you could just give us an overview of what is a short sale?
I sure can, Kori. What that is that you as a realtor, I'm sure you've encountered these situations where you actually become the bearer of bad news, and you're at that kitchen table and you're talking to that person who needs to sell their property. They may want to sell for many reasons, but you have to tell them that their home simply is not worth as much as they thought it was, and it happens to be worth less than what they owe to their bank. Sometimes you get those listings, Kori, when they already know that, and they say, hey, I've got a problem. I haven't made my payment for 3 or 4 months. My wife lost her job, or if we had a reduction in income, many different reasons of hardships. And so they already know they're in a bad situation, and they call you so they can have you help them to get out of their situation, and you value their home, and you then have to disclose the fact that their home's just not what they think it's worth. It is worth less than the amount that they owe to their mortgage companies. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 mortgages. And after closing costs and all of the other costs associated, including, your commissions and everything else, they simply just don't have enough to pay off their banks. And it's a really bad situation. It's called underwater. It's called negative equity or upside down. So ever since the recession of 2007, 2008, and 2009, there's a lot of terms of art that we use to describe the same situation.
Do they always use the term short sale now? Because that a lot of people think, oh, that means like a quick sale, and it has nothing to do with that, obviously. But
it's the opposite.
Is there right? Exactly. Is there some other word that people are using now, or is it still short sale?
It's still short sale, Adam. And back prior to the recession, people actually did short sales, but they didn't know what to call them.
Okay.
So they would just, call it an outlier, a one-off. They would call it a workout. They were able to work something out, or a settlement with their bank. But because the recession accelerated the amount of short sales in this country, or in other words, just really accelerated the number of homes that were in a negative equity situation, the banks had to figure out what they were going to do to reduce their losses, and sellers had to figure out what they were going to do to get out of their mortgage situation when they simply don't get enough proceeds in the sale to pay off their mortgage. And so therein evolved the short sale. And now that is the term. And not only is that the term that was used today, it's actually become the new normal for delinquent accounts. Banks now look at a short sale as the first option before foreclosure.
Okay. They prefer it.
They do. They prefer it because they actually lose half the amount in a short sale as opposed to foreclosure. So to kind of put it in perspective, it's the lesser of the two evils. A short sale, a bank's going to lose money. But in a foreclosure, they're going to lose twice as much money. And if you want to put it in percentage of the actual note, let's say you owe $300,000 to your lender for your home, Adam, and you're in a situation where it is upside down. Your home's only worth $250, but you owe $300. Well, if that seller, which in that scenario would be yourself, if you stop making your payments for whatever reason, there's many reasons why people cannot afford to make their mortgage payments anymore, then the bank has a couple of options. They can take the house back and under foreclosure. And if they do that, they're going to average losing about 40% of that entire note. But in a short sale, they're going to lose about 20%.
Okay.
So they simply lose half as much. It mitigates their losses.
Okay, interesting. So, when we first met, and like you said, you started your company in 2008.
Yes.
When everyone considers the real estate crash, right?
Yes.
And I guess since then, your company has grown, so you're seeing a rise in short sales, I would assume. In general, or, I kind of wrote a question down while I was preparing this, like, so short sales are still a thing? Like, people are still doing them, I guess?
Yeah.
I know they are because I'm trying to buy a house on short sale now, but
You are,
is it
okay.
really still popular? Or
It really is. And what's happened, it's interesting. The market's improved. We all know the real estate market has recovered, not recovered back to where it was in 2006 and 7, but it has recovered substantially. And in some areas of the country, it's recovered more than others.
Right.
So it's really a spectrum. Like, for example, up in Chicago, it hasn't recovered hardly at all. So Chicago is where St. Louis was 4 years ago.
Oh.
So are they still, as you say, popular? Are they still being used? The answer is yes, because of this new phenomena, this new, I call it a paradigm shift. When a lender takes an account and they call it a delinquent account, somebody falls behind on their payments, or they get a call from a homeowner saying, I'm current on my payments, but I'm not going to be in 6 months, because they anticipate a problem.
Right.
Perhaps the employer said, I'm going to give you your job for another 3 months, and then we're closing shop.
Right.
We're contracting. Lots of reasons. Spouses get ill, homeowners get ill. There's divorce. There are non-financial hardships, such as my boss is going to relocate me to Wisconsin. I can't afford 2 mortgages, and they're not going to pay for my relocation, but I got to go. That's a non-financial hardship. So it has become the new normal. So lenders now will look at a short sale. They call it an analytic. In other words, they put numbers in a certain matrix or a certain analytic system on their end. And if they determine that finding another buyer for that house and actually accepting less than the amount due puts more money in their pocket than taking the home back and having to sit on it for a year and a half and then sell it in the foreclosure market. And
Right.
what do they have to do during that entire year or year and a half while they sit on it? Well, they have to pay taxes, real estate taxes. They basically own the property. It's all the preservation costs and the holding costs they have to incur. Then they have to hire, prior to that, they have to hire a law firm to foreclose. And then once they sell it in the REO market, you being a realtor and a broker, Adam, you know that
you want a
those
discount.
properties, are deeply, deeply discounted. So it definitely has become the new normal. Now, there are less listings that are negative equity because we have had some recovery in the market. But because it's become a new normal, it's kind of a wash. We're taking our law firm and we're expanding and we're entering Chicago in a big way. And we're also going into Rockford because they're the 6th worst in the nation, and Rockford is the 2nd worst in the nation in terms of negative equity.
Okay. And you're in Florida too, weren't you?
We are not in Florida. No, what we've done is we provided our short sale negotiation services because we're very good at what we do. And we partnered with a law firm in Florida, but we don't practice law in Florida.
Okay.
We
Okay.
practice law in both states of Missouri and Illinois.
Okay, so you mentioned before, and sorry, I know, Kori, you have some questions too. Just jump in whenever you want to. But you mentioned before that someone can call now and say, hey, I'm going to lose my job in 3 months. I'm going to be in a short sale situation. Let's figure something out. 3 years ago, the bank would have said, I don't have time for you. Call me when you start missing payments. Kind of, right?
That's true. And it may still happen.
Okay.
So it all, the lawyer's proverbial reply to everything, it all depends. And I hate to say it really does depend. It depends on who your bank is, who the investors are, if you're owner occupied. But in a lot of our files, the banks will actually listen. And if we demonstrate to that lender, Adam, and demonstrate, with credible information that you really are going to be in a situation where you cannot afford to continue making those payments, let's say in December, today is October, and you can demonstrate that, a lot of times they'll start working with us now.
Okay.
Because that really heads it off at the pass, and it allows everybody to be proactive and to really address their problems head on rather than take their head in the sand and then lose 40% of the loan in a foreclosure option.
So the point is, you have to kind of prove to the bank that you're serious. I am serious. I'm losing my job and I'm not going to be able to pay. And that's where you guys come in, right? To help them prove how serious they are.
That's right. And that's not to say that in some files, Adam, sometimes the banks will say, sorry, I can't help you. You got to fall behind. And therein lies the paradox. And I know it doesn't sound correct. It's counterintuitive. And it's just such an enigma. People don't understand when the banks say you got to fall behind before I help you. It sounds absolutely insane. But if you really jump on, the other side of the fence, so to speak, you sit behind the desk where the bank people are, they have hundreds of thousands, if not, millions of these loans. And for them to react to a phone call that says, I'm going to be behind down the road, nobody's a prophet, nobody has the crystal ball. It doesn't make sense for them to react to something like that when somebody says, hey, I think I'm going to fall behind. Mm-hmm. They have to have something concrete. They're very analytical beings. The computers and the matrix and the analytics drive what they do. They're very numbers oriented. So most banks say, you know what, the proof is in the pudding. If you fall behind, I'll talk to you. But I don't have time to be talking to people that says I might be behind. But some banks actually will. So it really all depends.
And when you're getting them approved without them having to fall behind, is that still affecting their credit?
No, actually, if you can get them approved and they're still current on their mortgage, which, again, is an oddity, but we've done it many times before, then you can really protect their credit. Because if their FICO, let's say, is a 750 when we started the process, if they're not behind on their mortgage, and, of course, they're not behind on any other payments with their credit card debt and so forth, we can preserve their credit. Of course, there's a lot more to credit than just their 3-digit FICO number associated with their social.
Right.
I know we've talked a lot about the seller or the homeowner in this process, but is there any disadvantage to the buyer?
There is a disadvantage to the buyer and there's an advantage. So let me talk about both, if you will. The buyer has an advantage in which typically in a short sale situation, they are acquiring a piece of real estate for less than market value. That's a huge advantage. Another advantage to the buyer is that not only they're acquiring at a discount, but they're acquiring an occupied property, which means it's going to be well maintained. It's unlike a foreclosure where you may have your copper ripped out, you may have graffiti, and the house might be in disrepair. Totally different situation. And also, the neighborhoods are usually of much greater value in a short sale because if everything's occupied, then obviously the value of that neighborhood is going to be maintained as well. The disadvantage to the buyer is that you really don't know how long it's going to take. The good news, though, I can offer is that typically it's going to take between 2 and 4 months to acquire that property in a short sale. Whereas 2 to 3 years ago, Kori, it could have taken a year or more.
You said that one of the advantages is that the buyer is going to get to buy the property for under market value. And I know that to be true, but I don't understand why. Like you said, if I owed $300, but the home was only worth $250, I need to get the bank to agree to do a short sale so we can sell it. But you're insinuating, and the truth is, the buyer will probably buy it for $230 or something. Why do they get a discount even below market value?
Because it's in a short sale situation. So when the bank takes an offer, that whole category of that particular loan has already been earmarked. Uh-huh. And that loan has been earmarked because that loan typically has not been serviced for a few months. Again, I think we have to talk about the one-offs. We can spend a lot of time talking about the exceptions, but that really doesn't help the majority of your audience. So talk about the general situation. The typical short sale is that loan, that account has already been earmarked as distressed or non-performing. You've heard of the word non-performing loans. Because of that, statistically speaking, in all likelihood, that loan is not going to be serviced until they do something about it. So they know that in that situation, as they say, desperate times calls for desperate measures. The bank knows that by participating in a short sale and to allow that homeowner to find a buyer to move in is typically going to require that they accept less than the amount due because in that situation, the loan's not being performed anyway. And a lot of times those short sales, and I said most of them are occupied, some of them are not. Uh-huh. Some of them, they have already left. They may be 6 months behind on their mortgage. They may even be a year behind on their mortgage. And they may have already left because they're scared. They thought they had to. They hadn't been making their payments. Right. They don't know what to do. So they leave out of fear, or they had to relocate for a job, or they just simply left because they wanted to go move in with Aunt Susie or whatever their situation was. And so if it's vacant, it's worth less as well. But that loan has already been earmarked as delinquent. Therefore, that bank is going to accept less than the amount due because they know it's going to be difficult to sell that for market value.
Okay. And like the short sale I'm trying to buy now, the people want to be in a short sale because they can't afford the house, but that also means that they haven't been able to afford any of the updates that needed to happen to the house for the last 3 years, right? So I guess that's even more of a reason for me to get a discount on it.
That's exactly right. And when they say value, you've got the CMA and you got the market values, but then you have what they call distressed values. So these banks look at a house, let's say, that in a perfect world may be worth 200, but in a distressed value situation, in reflection of what you just said, the house is typically in disrepair, it's outmoded, outdated, everything above. And so it is going to be worth typically less than that original CMA value.
Tell me, have you seen a difference from your experience in dealing with the bank versus dealing with the credit union on getting a short sale approved? Is it easier if it's a credit union, local credit union?
It's actually more difficult.
No, don't tell me that.
It's a little bit more difficult in the credit union, although they have improved. And the reason is quite simple. The credit unions, Adam, typically do not have any kind of recourse. So, for example, let's say, most of our files we're dealing with the big five, which is, your Wells Fargo, your Chase, your U.S. Bank, your Bank of America's, the big five financial institutions. They have recourse typically because
What's recourse?
Recourse means that they can get their losses from somewhere. So if they lose that, let's say they lose $75,000 on that loan because they had to sell it, except less than the amount due, and they just took a haircut of $75,000. They can recoup that $75,000 loss on their mortgage, sometimes by entities or government-sponsored enterprises such as FHA, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, those insurers. Sometimes they can actually recoup their losses from mortgage insurance companies. We've all heard of mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
The straight word is PMI, which is really wrong because PMI is actually a company, but it's called mortgage insurance, and that's what it is. It's just an insurance policy. So if a bank loses money on their mortgage, they can basically file a claim with their mortgage insurance company, and they recoup the losses. Now, let's say credit union. That's what your question was. Credit unions don't have that. Most credit unions have those in-house. A lot of credit unions hold HELOCs, which are home equity lines of credit. So they don't have anywhere to take those losses. So your house burns down. You know what you're going to do. You're going to file a claim with your homeowner's insurance policy. These credit unions don't have homeowners insurance policies.
Oh, no.
So, and there's another reason they're hard to work with. They don't have systems and departments.
Right.
So when you were dealing with an entity that doesn't have, here's your forms, fill out Form A, fill out this is the process, put you into the hopper, this is what it's going to look like 2 months down the road. They don't have systems. Sometimes you're dealing with the president. Sometimes it can go rather quickly. Because if you're dealing with the top dog, the president of the credit union, and sometimes you are because they don't have short sale departments, they don't have ad hoc committees. They don't have anybody who has authority above them, and they can make very quick decisions. So sometimes you can get it done in a month.
Is there ever a situation where the seller's trying to list their property and then they find out they have to do a short sale? There's no other option?
Well, the option everybody has is to ignore their problem and not pay their mortgage and stay in their house as long as they can without paying their debt. I would never advise that to anybody because your credit's going to be pretty much devastated for 5 to 7 years, and you're not going to be able to move into another home for a long, long time, which is not good. The other option would be to rent. So you can stay in your home, and these are options to where we call them home retention options, meaning that, no, you don't have to move. You can stay there. Even though you can't afford to make your mortgage, you can find a tenant. Of course, they still have to relocate, but they still own the home. So if they find a tenant that can pay the mortgage or the majority of the mortgage, some people write it out and they wait for the market to recover, and then they sell their home when the market recovers, if it does recover to a level they need. Another option, Kori, would be to do some kind of workout with their bank. The popular term is a loan modification. And if they could modify their loan, which statistically is really difficult to do that, a lot of loan modifications may work for a while. It's called a trial period. And then after about 90 days, the loan modification isn't working any longer. It fails, and then it goes into a short sale or a foreclosure situation. So there are options. That is to rent, hold out, get a better job, make more money, pay your debt, rob Peter to pay Paul, which is, of course, always an option. Go to your Uncle Harry or whoever that you can get some financing from. Or modify your loan, which is really, really difficult to do. Or short sale, or just simply walk away and do what they call strategic default or strategic foreclosure, which is the worst thing out of all the options I just described.
That's actually how our property management company started growing, is when we'd go to these people's houses and say, we can sell your house. And it turns out they were going to lose a bunch of money. And we're like, or we can rent it for you for more than your mortgage payment, and that's kind of how our property management company started.
Really?
So
interesting.
It's been good. Now we have, I guess, a lot of people who just want to be property owners or investors, but it started out with a lot of people who their option was short sale or rent it out. So
Right. Yeah, you can definitely rent it.
There was some law that I forget what it was called, like the Home Mortgage Forgiveness Act of 2012 or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. It's that's the Tax Act. Yeah, the Mortgage Forgiveness Debt Relief Act. And that expired actually in 2013, but what they did is they extended it to protect everybody who closed in 2014.
Okay.
So what that means is that if you closed a short sale transaction, meaning you went to the title company and it's done and over and it's actually closed, any time in the year 2014 all the way up to December 31st, 2014, that you will not be taxed for that deficiency. So let me explain what that is. About 20 minutes ago, I was talking about this shortage or the haircut that the banks take in a short sale. Let's say there's $75,000 that they never get out of a short sale, because that's what a short sale is, selling or accepting less than the amount due. That $75,000 to the IRS is considered phantom income. Aptly described, phantom, meaning it really doesn't exist, but it does exist on paper. So phantom income, the IRS sees that as a forgiveness of debt, which is the same thing as if you owed me $1,000, Adam, and I say I forgive you of your debt, it's almost as though I put $1,000 in your pocket, isn't it? If you look at the other side of the column. So they call that phantom income. So the IRS has the right to actually tax you on that phantom income or that shortage. That act protects everybody and does not permit the IRS to tax on that shortage for any closings that happened all the way up until December 31st, 2014. That has expired, but most people, when they short sale their home and they close, qualify what they call the insolvency clause. I'm not a tax attorney, nor am I a tax advisor, but because of what we do, we have to be very familiar with this. So we make sure that all our clients in closing their short sales, Adam, always go to their tax advisor to get this advice. And we've met with tax attorneys and tax advisors and CPAs, but most people qualify for the insolvency clause, which existed before this act, which protects them from taxation.
We just had this credit union deal that I'm doing. The credit union said, yeah, sure, we'll do a short sale. The seller will be responsible for the difference. And I'm saying, well, that's not a short sale, first of all, if you're going to try to get the money from them, you know. But so the seller needs to look into this insolvency clause that you're mentioning?
They do. But what you just said is that the seller be responsible for the difference, and that's different. That's just the deficiency. Now we're talking about taxation, which is kind of, they're related, but they're two different animals. The deficiency, when that credit union said, well, sure, your client's going to have to pay for the difference, and I agree with you, it's not even a short sale.
Right.
They probably wanted to set your client up for some kind of scheduled payments, I would assume, like over 5 years to pay the difference.
Well, I don't think we got that far, but
okay,
possibly.
Let's just assume that they did.
Okay.
And let's assume that difference was $100,000. Well, your client in that situation would not receive a 1099 from the bank because the bank didn't take a shortage. The bank still get their money. They're just prorating it or amortizing it over 5 years. Let's say that they did accept less than the amount due and there was nothing due from your client. So they actually waived the deficiency. When they waive the deficiency, they can issue the 1099 to your client stating, hey, we waived the deficiency, which means put your hands up. We agreed not to take any money from your client for that $75,000 shortage, which is a gift to your client. Now your client has to pay taxes on that difference.
Okay. One of the questions I was going to ask you, which I'm going to try to answer partly, and then you can finish for me if you don't mind. Why should a seller or a realtor who's a listing agent use a company like yours instead of just trying to do it alone like so many realtors have done? I've come up with 3 reasons so far. And one is you can possibly help the seller save their credit, right? If you can get the bank or the lender to agree without them having to miss a payment, which you guys would probably have a much better chance of them having to happen, maybe we can help save their credit, right? Number 2, it's going to happen faster, most likely. Because I've done a short sale before where it took 2 years, and it didn't happen. Actually, it didn't close after 2 years. So you guys probably could help us.
That's painful.
It was very painful. Believe
really
me,
painful.
I think it was like a $30,000 house. So we did a lot of work for 2 years to not have it close. Do you guys help the seller avoid this tax on phantom income, or help them somehow avoid getting 1099 for the difference?
You want to take the first one, the credit? We said credit, speed, and tax.
There you go.
That's what I've done.
No, yeah, those are my 3. You go ahead.
That's what I do, and I hear a lot of information. I'm like, I break it down to words. So, okay, credit, speed, and tax. Let's take the credit first.
Talk to me.
So, I can talk to you. So, the credit, we save their credit. And I want to emphasize to the audience, and this is so important, I cannot underscore it enough. In fact, I published an article on this, and the Baltimore Sun and the Huffington Post picked it up, which I was excited to see, because it's such a misnomer or a fallacy out there. Everybody thinks their credit is just this magic 3-digit number that's associated with your social. And, like a 620 or 640 or a 750, or if you're really lucky, you've got an 800, or I don't even know how high it goes. But
850, I think.
850, there you go. And credit is so much more than that. So that little 3-digit number that we all know we have is called FICO. Some people don't know. They just call it whatever it is. But that's the FICO. And you can get that with freecreditreport.com. There's lots of websites that'll give it to you free. But credit is more. Credit is also the ability to purchase another home. So if somebody goes through a short sale, we can get them back into another house in as little as a year, Adam. If they stick their head in the sand and do not address their problems and pretty much just fold their arms and say, I can't handle it, I'm going to walk away, let the bank take it, I'm done. Sad thing is, they may be done with that house, but they're not done with their life, and they're not done with their credit. In our society, in our country, credit is everything. So they may not be able to get back into a home for 5 to 7 years, which is a big deal, especially if you've got kids and you've got the white picket fence and you've got the spouse and you've got the dog and everything else. I don't even have to go into that. And not too many people like to live in the basement of their parents' homes or Uncle Charlie's homes, and it's hard to find a landlord to even rent any space to you, because if you've got a foreclosure on your record, if I were a landlord, I would probably go look for another tenant. So that's something people don't think about. Another thing is, and this is really important, a lot of our jobs are tied to a security clearance. So the job you have, if you touch money, I've been told if you just actually touch money at the customer service counter, at Walmart and Lowe's, there's some kind of security clearance tied to your position. And it's a spectrum. So it might be 1 or it might be 10 if you work for the CIA. It's still a security clearance. If foreclosure hits your credit record, then they pull credit every few months, and sometimes very systematically. They can legally terminate you if foreclosure hits your credit because it just breached the conditions to your security clearance. Wow. It can also preclude or to prevent you from getting a job that requires a security clearance. So it can have a devastating impact on your employment, current employment, and future employment opportunities. Not to mention, what kind of interest rates are you going to be paying for financing a car, getting credit? And then one of the American dreams is owning your own business. Most people have to go out and get some kind of line of credit, SBA loan, capital, seed money, call it what you want. There's a lot of words for it. But a loan to start your business, I don't know too many lenders, when they pull credit, are going to loan you money to start your business if you've got foreclosure on your record.
Sure.
So there's just a lot to credit. I really wanted to emphasize that. And because we're specialized in that, we can really help preserve your credit and preserve life as you know it.
Okay.
Second thing, speed. This is all we do. So inevitably, if this is all we do and you do one thing 24/7, day in, day out, you really do your job well.
Sure.
We have right phone contacts with a lot of entities and banks and investors that influence policies and guidelines. Because we are a law firm, we can get through doors that the normal person couldn't. We do talk to legal counsel at the banks, to the investors. We have contacts even with the U.S. Treasury that have crafted and have drafted certain short sale programs, such as the HAFA program. There's a lot of red phone contacts that not only are important people very high up in the food chain that make ultimate decisions, but people that have known us for years that really do give us preferential treatment because we make their job easier, because they don't have to educate us. They don't have to say, well, here's a BPO and this is what you need to do and here's the forms. We're way ahead of the curve. So we've reduced the time from 12 months, sometimes 14 months, in answer to your question, Kori, down to about 2 to 4 months. And it's not just us. The banks have gotten better. The banks have fine-tune their systems and their processes as well. We also keep realtors out of trouble because, like, for example, the Supreme Court in Illinois has passed an opinion in their mortgage subcommittee that says any component of short sale negotiations is the practice of law, because we give legal advice as to deficiencies in credit. We negotiate notes. We negotiate mortgages. We are always working with divorce attorneys and bankruptcy attorneys and everything else. And so we also keep everybody out of trouble. So, for example, we get phone calls from people saying, I'm getting sued by my bank. I short sold my home 3 years ago. What do I do? And they were told that they got to wash their hands of it. Well, the deficiency wasn't weighed because it wasn't handled or negotiated properly.
So, by the way, it's not like a seller needs to either call you or call a realtor, right? We can all work together.
That's right. In fact, we cannot do this without people like you. It's a perfect collaboration because we're not realtors.
Right.
It's a perfect collaboration where we negotiate and we have a 95% success rate. And so when you take a listing on and we're negotiating that short sale, then you collect your commission, and we've got that 95% success rate of rowing the boat in the same direction, making sure the buyer gets that house, protecting the seller, preserving life as they know it, and making sure that you have a successful closing.
So after this home affordability thing ended in 2014, have you had success helping people not get 1099 for the difference?
Absolutely. In fact, most of our files, and I just want to clarify one thing, the act that ended in 2013, it was extended to December 31st of 2014. That's the Tax Act. That's the Mortgage Forgiveness Debt Relief Act.
Okay.
That's something different. The act that you just referenced is called home affordability. I think you're talking about HAFA.
I love just mixing them all together.
I know it's confusing, but I'm really tracking you. So
okay.
HAFA is a short sale program that was promulgated by the U.S. Treasury, and that's alive and well today. In fact, that HAFA program we love because that puts $10,000 in the seller's pocket for relocation incentive fees.
Okay.
So that's a big deal. But your question was?
So have you had success helping the sellers not get invoiced, basically, or get the 1099?
If the deficiency is waived, there's a chance that they're going to get the 1099. What we're successful with is that, first of all, you always want the deficiency waived. You don't want the bank having to go after that deficiency because then you're always looking over your shoulder and you're haunted. Forever, when the bank can just wait for you to get back on your feet and go after you. So there's always a potential that they may get a 1099 and they may not. If they do get a 1099, we need to make sure, and we always do this, we give them the information they need to take to their tax advisor. In fact, I just got a call last week that they were doing taxes on the October 15th day the taxes were due for an extension. And I was giving them the IRS publication notice, I think it's 4682, something like that, to their accountant because the accountant wasn't quite sure what to do.
Right.
So I was giving him that mortgage debt forgiveness IRS publication so that they could actually file that. And in this situation, he was totally protected by the act because his closing happened in January of 2014. But if they're not, we make sure that those accountants are handling it correctly under the insolvency clause.
When you first started this, as far as I know, you were basically like the only company out there doing it.
In the Midwest.
In the Midwest. Okay. And
Yeah.
okay, at least in St. Louis that
Yes.
I know of, And now I guess you have some competitors and like I've had two buyers ask me about this one particular house. It's a short sale and it says, the buyer has to pay $4,900 or something like that dollars at closing. Is that you guys? Is that
No.
just something else? Can we talk about money a little bit?
Oh yeah, we can, and I welcome that. First of all, we're the only law firm that is doing this in the Midwest that I know of, exclusively.
So this is just some guy who thinks he knows a lot about short sales, probably.
Well, and that is, our main competitor. Ironically, they're not lawyers at all because this is such an arcane area. You can't go to like a legal seminar and learn short sale negotiations or the practice
Right.
of short sale law. It just doesn't exist. We're actually going to be speaking for the Missouri Bar next spring at the Real Estate Institute, so we will be teaching other attorneys how to do
There you
it,
go.
and I welcome to do that.
Okay.
Maybe not 4 years ago, but doing it now. As far as our competition basically are agents that say, hey, I think I can do this. Unfortunately, we get phone calls from former homeowners that short sold their home where agents negotiated their short sales and they're getting sued by their banks because these are legal documents that come from the banks that need to be interpreted and negotiated.
Right.
By an attorney. And so when you see the buyer's side paying fees, typically what that is non-legal entity, person or company or structure that are charging the buyer the fees for negotiating. Now, we simply don't have to do that because we're a law firm. We have 3 other sources to get our fees from. For example, we can get our legal fees from the seller's incentive. I had mentioned the HAFA program. In fact, we influenced that policy and guideline so that we can get paid directly on the HUD from those fees.
Okay.
That was years ago. We can get paid from any bank seller incentive fees. We can collect advanced legal fees from the seller as well when we take on a file. And there's a lot of different other areas that we can actually take the fees because we work closely with title companies because we are the seller's attorney. And in the short sale process, they do allow and allocate money for sellers' legal fees. But when you're a non-legal entity, there's very, very few places you can take it. So a lot of times they charge the buyer. What we're concerned with is that when you charge the buyer, let's say the almost $5,000 in your scenario that you depicted, that's going to narrow your pool of buyers. And if you narrow your pool of buyers, how do you reconcile that with your fiduciary duty to your seller? And that's a problem we have as an attorney, and we simply don't need to take the fees from the buyer.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but just kind of like theoretically, where are we even agreeing that? Where is the buyer even agreeing to pay that at closing? I don't think we're going to put that on the sales contract necessarily.
The way that works, and believe me, I get this question all the time when I'm in presentations. Apparently, that there's a contract or an agreement that they have, the seller and the buyer, and everybody signs on at the beginning.
Okay.
When that buyer makes the offer. Now, what we do is that we represent the seller. So, we get our business from realtors, from people like you, that when they discover these situations, they call us and we're brought to the table, so to speak, and we start the process. And we protect your commissions because we don't take your commissions. You get your full 6. And so in those situations, they have it all agreed up front where the buyer is going to be paying those fees. And whether the buyer pays fees on the HUD at closing, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But that's something that was born out of the recession where people were trying to figure out how to get paid to do these. And they were not a legal entity, so they were not permitted to take any money from HAFA or from the seller. You can't take advance fees from a seller if you're not a legal entity.
Yeah.
That's where that all came from. We've had agents say, I want the buyer to pay your fees. And if they've already got the deal put together, what we've done is we've consulted with the MAR and we've consulted with the legal counsel of the Missouri Association of Realtors.
Right.
So we know how to do that right and to keep everybody above board and keep everybody out of trouble. So we can do it as long as it doesn't prejudice the best interest of our client. And when the deal is already put together, a lot of times it doesn't. If the bank approves it, the deficiency is waived. We can do that, but it is a one-off ad and we don't promote it.
It seems really weird that someone would, I mean, of course, I'm talking to you now, and of course I'm going to say this, but it seems really weird that why would someone use a non-legal entity who has to charge this much money instead of using your firm?
Well, I think it's because we haven't got to their office to give them a presentation.
Okay.
And, there's only so many of us, and sometimes it's hard to do. And you have choices in advertising, which I'm sure you think of every day in running your company. It's like, how are you going to get the message out? And that's always an ongoing challenge. And the way we get the word out is word of mouth. We do presentations a lot. To put ads in newspapers and billboards and all of that, we're very reluctant because we don't feel like it's cost effective or targeted advertising. But now we're actually starting for example, in Chicago, and our headquarters is St. Louis. We're never leaving St. Louis. So when I say Chicago, that doesn't mean we're moving. We're just expanding. But we're actually going directly to the homeowners. And so that's exciting. So we're dropping about 26,000 letters to these distressed homeowners that we've bought data from so that we can show them there's a better way.
Okay.
And
they
that's
have
another
notice
way.
of default type of system or something?
That's another way that we're marketing. So we're talking about the messaging and why would somebody not use us and, have the buyer pay and then you're limiting your pool of buyers? I frankly don't know because we do keep everybody out of trouble. Our success rate is 95%. We don't take anything from your commission. We're very serious, and I think we do a pretty good job because this is all we do.
Tell us how the listeners can get a hold of you.
Sure. Our number is 636-220-2218. We have a website, of course, KayserLawFirm.com. Kayser's with a Y, not an I.
KayserLawFirm.com.
You got it. Perfect.
Okay.
With a Y instead of an I. We also have an email address, which is the info@KayserLawFirm.com. And that is the way you can get a hold of us. So it's pretty easy. We're out and about. We have a lot of, and one thing I want to mention, that's how you get in the door to get us on board so we can start the process. But once you're in our firm and you become a client, you then get the direct contact information of the person who's going to handle you.
So you'll get assigned like a negotiator?
You get assigned a negotiator, and you don't have to go through the front office or a secretary. Not like a typical law firm. You get assigned your negotiator, and then you have their direct contact information, even including texting and everything else.
So I'm going to jump into, I have 5 questions that I like to ask everybody. They're a little more personal, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Not too personal, though.
That's
but okay. So this is my 5 questions.
Can I plead the fifth on any of them?
Sure. Yeah, Joey he's got his finger ready to delete whatever we need to delete
Yeah,
here.
I see that finger on the button.
Okay, so who lives under your roof?
Well, I have 2 children. I can do
Okay.
that. I'm in West County. I have 2 children. I have a 25-year-old who is the, I'm going to put a plug in for her.
There.
Thank you.
Please.
She's the marketing strategic coordinator, big long title, for HEC television station.
Really?
Which is higher education channel. She has a degree in communications and marketing, and she is a mover and a shaker, and she's out there doing a lot of things, making a lot of things happen.
Cool.
So now she does not live with me. She shouldn't at 25.
Okay.
She's very independent. I have a 12-year-old 7th grader.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I am engaged to be married.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we don't live together yet.
Oh,
and
my gosh, your parents would be so happy about that.
yeah, and we live in West County, just right at Doherty Ferry and 270, and have been there for about 8.5 years.
Wow, perfect.
Wonderful neighborhood. Love it, love it.
Beautiful. Okay, and where are you your best?
I am best at creating, energizing, motivating, and making things happen. I love to connect the dots. I love to look at dots and seeing the synergy and the common denominator between a lot of dots and putting the right people in the right positions, accelerating companies. I love to identify the deficiencies and the defects and everything else in not just my own company and improve it, but other companies as well. So I run this law firm, but there are other interests I have.
Okay.
Definitely. I started my first company when I was 15, so I'm more of an entrepreneur than an attorney.
Wow. Do you have a favorite blog or podcast? But being that you're an entrepreneur, I want to add in there and or favorite kind of book or something that, something that had a big impact on you.
Let me say 2 things.
Sure.
I'm going to give you
Yeah,
a
go
different
ahead.
dimension to me because, sometimes we have a tendency to talk all about business, and life
Yeah.
is a lot more than just business. I grew up in the country, and I was
Really?
fortunate to have, not a farm or anything, but we were fortunate enough to have 3 acres, and I had a gorgeous quarter horse and spent a lot of time with my horse.
Okay.
So I have a lot of that outside nature in me that I always kind of go back on the weekends, and we do a lot of hiking, and
Okay.
I love the outdoors. My favorite place to visit is Costa Rica. Been to an eco adventure in Costa Rica and experienced earthquakes and volcanoes and whitewater rafting, and love to zip line. So I love the outdoors.
Who knew?
Still love my horses.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's definitely a different dimension. And one of the books that really impacted me that touches that nature part of me is Last Child in the Woods. And it's just basically about how culture has lost touch with nature, and we're also, digitized and everything. So the other book, though, that regards to my business, and like I said, I'm kind of maybe a walking contradiction, but it really gives me a good balance in life, is High Tech, High Touch. That is a New York bestseller, and it's about how we are quickly losing the touch of the power of the human voice. I just did a presentation of the power of the human voice downtown at the Cortex building, which is on my website.
Cool.
One of our popular acronyms that we use in our firm is PUP, and it stands for Pick Up the Phone, because the
Okay.
voice is so much more powerful than an email. You need both, but you got to know when to pick up the phone.
Good. Okay. We'll have to check out those 2 books. I've heard this term high tech, high touch before, but I didn't know it was actually a book.
There's the book. In fact, I think I have it with me, actually.
Oh, good. All right. And what's your guilty pleasure?
I love a good movie. I can't stand TV. I'm always looking for a good place to dance because I love to dance.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. And last question. Who is your mentor and how have you thanked them?
Richard Branson.
Really?
Yeah, when it comes to business.
Okay.
My other personal mentor would have to be my father. He's the
Okay.
steady Eddie. He portrays that stay the course.
Uh-huh.
He's amazing at staying the course, keeping your eye on the ball, and
Okay.
he's extremely honest. He teaches me those virtues that you pick up $20 on the sidewalk and you go to the person in front of you and say, I think you dropped this.
Uh-huh.
So I owe that to my father. Business is Richard Branson. The guy is amazing. I've read some of his books, and he is the icon of entrepreneurialism. And I've tried to get in contact with him, but it's hard.
He's probably on his own private island.
Yeah,
hanging out.
that or in a hot air balloon or something.
Okay. Great. That's the end of it. Tell me what else anything else you want to say or mention that we forgot.
Sure. I do want to underscore the fact that we would love to help people. That's one thing we enjoy doing. And we really do help people in the time of need. And the short sale is an amazing tool that really is a win-win-win. It's not just a win. It's not a victor for one person on one side of the fence.
Uh-huh.
It really, first and foremost, helps the seller to preserve life as they know it. And it's not an embarrassing situation. Foreclosure is.
Uh-huh.
So we can really help them to get through the process. We just got a call from one of our former clients, and it was interesting because we had just short sold their property, and they were calling us to get the approval letter and the HUD and all the documents because guess what? They were buying another house.
Wow.
And if they would have let that go back to the bank that phone call would have never happened. And it's a win for the buyer because they get a good deal, and it's a win for realtors because it keeps everybody in the transaction. If it goes back to the bank, you've lost it.
Exactly.
If it goes for a short sale, you can also not only sell their house and bring us to the table to negotiate that, but they're going to be calling Adam Kruse again to get back into a house in another year because they're going to be qualified.
That's right.
And it also helps the banks because they lose less money. Now, we don't represent the banks, but again, it's a win-win-win. And I just want to underscore that because I think it's very, very important.
Beautiful. KayserLawFirm.com. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks, Adam.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.